Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and we are presented to you by FanDuel, part of the Bleav podcasting network, and also the College Huddle. Check out the College Huddle where you can find numerous podcasts from fans and those who cover the teams who do a great job. We got a couple of college huddlers here with us tonight as we are doing the Around the Big Ten podcast. That is 3 guests with 3 questions in 30 minutes. Maybe 30 minutes. Sometimes we go a little bit over, but that's just how the podcast goes. So we have a great selection here with us, Kurt, Ryan, and Jerry. Kurt, let's start with you. Go ahead, introduce yourself, let people know where they can find your podcast at.
Yeah, I'm Kurt with Sky U Pod. We're the College Huddle's Golden Gopher affiliate for football. We're pretty much anywhere you listen, just at Sky U Pod and YouTube at Sky U Pod, and social media, we're at Sky U Pod 1 on X. So that's what we'll be tweeting our rage tweets during the game.
I'm Ryan Winter. I'm at Sports Chat 503, and you can find me on YouTube, X, and Instagram. Go ahead and shoot me a text, man.
I'm Jerry, the Rabid Wolverine Football Podcast. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, Spotify, anywhere you find podcasts, basically. Great to be with all of you.
Very good. Yeah, we got 3 rousing topics to talk about tonight. Of course, we have Penn State we're going to bring up. I don't think it would be a podcast this week if you didn't talk about Penn State, so that's going to be discussed. We're going to talk about the disrespect of the Big Ten. Listen, every single year, it's like can't get any respect. RESPECT. We need it, but we don't get it from the national media. We'll get these guys' thoughts on that. And then, of course, we'll finish it up with everybody's upset pick of the week. So, Kurt, we're going to start with you here, man. This Penn State program, they lose to Oregon, and it wasn't the worst loss in the world. It wasn't exactly impressive looking there for 3 quarters on offense, but they came alive in the 4th quarter. Then they lose in double overtime, and then they just completely lay an egg to UCLA, the worst Power 4 team in all of college football at the time. And now UCLA, some people are saying, hey, maybe they get 2, 3, maybe even 4 wins at this point after taking down Penn State. Kurt, I'm curious your thoughts. How do you view this Penn State program now? Do you view this as like season is over, but they can reset next season? This is still a top 10, like a top Big Ten kind of program, or are you kind of like, listen, this program's going downhill fast. You can't have that much talent coming back and not be threatening to even make the playoffs. Kurt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start with this just really quickly. If you're in the Penn State locker room, you got to look at that schedule that's remaining and believe that it's still there, right? A lot of big games still left. You had high expectations coming in. So if you're in that locker room, you're saying everything is still on the table for there. We can still get in and make something happen here. Realistically, just looking at it as an outsider, I think the program looks stuck right now. I think James Franklin did a lot of good things for this program. He's been there. This is his 11th season, I believe, 10th or 11th year. I think it's kind of gotten to the point of as far as he can take it. They went all in on the resources around him, getting him basically any defensive coordinator he want with Knowles getting away from Ohio State. They've been patient with him on the offensive side of the ball. I don't know how many offensive coordinators it is that he's actually gone through now, but they seem to be putting in the money as a university to go out and get the guys he wants. And like, listen, I'm not the biggest Drew Aller fan in the world, but he is a 5-star player. Like, have good players there. Like, roster-wise is definitely a top 3 to 4 team in the Big Ten roster-wise. It's not working right now. I think Franklin has kind of reached the end as far as he can take them. He's a great program developer. I just don't think he's that head coach that's going to get them over the hump, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I would agree on that. I was just out there for that Penn State game for Oregon, and I was really struck when I was talking to everybody in the tailgate how much they disliked James Franklin. I had no idea, really. I mean, I knew that there was some discontent. I knew that there were people who were, saying he couldn't win the big one, but it was pretty insane how much they didn't. And that was before the game. And then when the Ducks, come out and, at halftime, a lot of Penn State fans were actually kind of saying, hey, we got a good game here. This isn't what anybody expected, but this could be something. At the end of the game, they were like, this is it again. There were a lot of people who were saying the Ducks were going to win automatically because they just didn't think he could win the big game. So then they were convinced at that, leaving. Then they all were saying, let's just go to UCLA, get a win, come back, and we'll kind of regroup. The loss to UCLA was horrible. And I went and saw the Ducks play at USC when Clay Helton was on the way out, and the Bruins or the Trojan fans were so hateful to him. When he was running out of the tunnel, they were screaming everything at him, yelling at him. It's horrible. That's what it looked like when Franklin ran through the tunnel at the Rose Bowl. You had that group of Penn State fans that were there cussing him out on the way out and everything else. This is a real danger zone for Penn State. They're in a real tough spot because they, like you said, JR, they had everything coming back. They had the table was set for them, and the whole thing is crumbling right now.
Well, guys, I think you guys nailed it. First of all, here's my take. I think that they do have one of the best rosters in all of college football. I think it's hard to argue. I also agree with Kurt that I don't think Aller is one of the best quarterbacks in all of football. I mean, he just never plays up to his potential. But here's the thing. It always comes back to the coach. And you can go back to last year, bad coaching decisions. I mean, when they played Ohio State last year, ball inside the 10, they didn't give the ball to their best player once, right? Against Oregon, again, bad coaching. UCLA, the punter stands in the end zone for how many seconds before anybody started rushing them. So I think that goes all back to the coach. Now, here's where I'm going to differ from all of you. And I have to say, I hate Penn State. I'm not a Penn State fan. Before I say this, I have to make that clear. But I just have a funny feeling, like with all the negativity around the program and everybody saying he can't win a big game, and I do agree, but I just have a funny feeling that they may end up rattling off some wins here, and maybe some wins that everybody's saying no chance, right? They're saying Iowa's going to be tough. Indiana's, probably a loss. Ohio's a loss. I'm just saying, I have a funny feeling that maybe that locker room looked in the mirror and said, it's on me. And each player said that. And maybe Franklin looked in the mirror and said, I need to change. Don't be surprised if that happens. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it will. Don't be surprised if it does.
And Jerry, to your point, I said it on the last podcast that we did, or 2 podcasts ago that we did on Sunday night. I asked Zach, I said, look, this is back to back, so it's a lot different, right? But in the same way, it's really not all that different from Ohio State when they lost to Michigan. And there were people saying after that game, oh, Ohio State's still going to win it all. Now, I want to be clear, that Michigan team last year is not anything like this UCLA team, so it's not like but still, Penn State, they were over 20-point favorites in this game, and they essentially just had the other way they lost, where their defense could not stop UCLA in that one. So there is hope here. I think if you're a Penn State fan, your best hope is that Indiana wins this weekend. Sorry, Ryan. And then you are able to beat Indiana later on, because that would almost kind of like rectify the loss to Oregon, right? You could kind of swing it that way. And I do think a Penn State team with losses to Oregon, Ohio State, and UCLA, assuming they lose that Ohio State game, if they beat Indiana, they could find their way sneaking in there. They'll need some help, but I think it could happen. Kurt, I'm going to ask a follow-up question really fast. This one probably won't take as much explanation. Maybe it will, and I'll eat my words. But if Penn State does indeed make the playoffs, or miss the playoffs this season, if they do indeed lose to Ohio State, and they say they're 8-4, all right, let's put that in the hypothetical situation. They're 8-4, they lose to Ohio State and Indiana, they win the rest of their games. Do you think it makes sense to actually work toward, because obviously he's got a $56 million buyout, it's not like you're going to fire him this year, but do you think it actually makes sense to work toward firing Franklin and moving on from him? Or are you one of those people that kind of looks at the scenario and say, it didn't work so well when Nebraska moved on from Bo Pelini, didn't work so well when Wisconsin moved on from Luke Fickell. Look, Kirk Ferentz might not make the playoffs, but he's consistent. He's going to win you games. You got to keep that kind of guy around, because you just don't know what is possibly on the horizon. Kurt, do you think if they go 8-4, they should work toward firing James Franklin or try to stick with him?
I think it's all, like you said, the $56 million number is huge. I think it's all dependent on if they know the guy they want next to replace him. I don't think you move on and just blindly try and grab the next best hot commodity to come in and try and fill in to Penn State. Like, just thinking off the top of my head, like, what coaches that are doing well at their current spot is like a big enough spot where Penn State would want to go out and get them. Just off the top of my head, nothing is jumping out. I saw some people.
You might think of as Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, maybe. But
do you think he'd leave for that though?
That's
maybe he
what I'm
would.
saying. I don't know.
Okay, so maybe Lane Kiffin. The name I did see people kind of start throwing around, which I thought was really interesting. It's kind of like, does the deal with the devil doesn't have any magic left in it? Is if Jimbo Fisher comes up from retirement out of off of this Florida State, Texas A&M run, and they just go, you know what? Let's just turn to a guy that he does have a natty. I know it faltered out for him fast, but that's a name that I just thought was really interesting, just because it's kind of like just enough different from Franklin to like be a little bit more of an X's and O's guys on offense to maybe make it appealing to them. But I digress. So I think it all depends on if they have the right guy in mind of who they can get.
Yeah, I would say they're firing him. I feel like when I just read the room of the Penn State alums and the Penn State faithful and the supporters, I think there's a big backlash against him right now. And if he goes 8-4, I think they're going to jump out the window.
I think the number is too big for a firing. Now, I could see him moving on without the firing occurring. And maybe that, maybe it's a mutual, hey, move on, take a different job if they don't have to do the buyout. But with the buyout, man, donors are going to have to step up and really help them, because you figure with the $58 million plus with the $20 million in nil money, right? I shouldn't say nil. The money the university has to pay the players, that number is big. I mean, so many schools are letting go of staffers and so forth just because of the $20 million. So paying that buyout on top of that, I think it's a steep ask. Maybe there's a way they mutually part, but I don't know that they'll fire them. So.
Yeah, it's hard to say that you'd be able to mutually part. I don't know if I would leave $56 million on the table.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying. Like, that would really be the only way it could happen, right? Like, you'd have to figure something out there. So, yeah, really interesting stuff. Penn State, for reference, they were third in the Big Ten in odds to win the Big Ten. They were kind of that team up there that was close with Ohio State and Oregon. I think, actually, in fact, they were second until Oregon beat them. After UCLA beat them, they have now dropped down to 7th in odds on FanDuel to win the Big Ten championship game. They are tied with Illinois at plus 8,000. So if you're one of those people that thinks they can make the Big Ten championship game still, you might be able to jump on that. But their playoff odds have gone down substantially as well. They were favored, and now they are at plus 710 to make the playoffs on FanDuel. So we'll see how that works out for them. All right, let's go ahead and bring up our second question here. And Ryan, we'll start with you on this one. What is the one area in which the Big Ten is currently being disrespected the most by the national media? You're looking at like Heisman here. Do they not have enough representation in the top 25? Playoff discussions. Are there too many people leaving them out of that? From your vantage point, Ryan, where is the Big Ten being disrespected the most by the national media?
Well, I might be biased, but coming from a West Coast that got completely demolished by this national media you speak of, and the cable companies and everything, we're happy to be in the promised land of the Big Ten. We think it's freaking phenomenal. I mean, coming from the Pac-12, literally sinking ship, I think it could be the Heisman maybe. Historically, we want to give it to quarterbacks. Sometimes the Big Ten is not really known as a quarterback league as much as the quarterback league that we came from in the Pac-12, producing a lot of good quarterbacks. But SEC always gets so much love up front for just this automatic third or fourth or fifth team to be a part of the conversation for the playoff. And I think that's probably the next I'm a Big Ten guy now. Our next step as a Big Ten to try to get to a position where there's a kind of not an automatic qualifier, but basically from the national media side, an automatic third or fourth team that's a no-brainer that's going to go to the playoff.
Wow. This is a tricky question because for the first time in a long time, at least the last couple of years, we can say the Big Ten is equal or better than the SEC, right? Yeah. So I don't know that we're getting disrespected too many places. In fact, we're almost leading the charge in regards to all the playoff talks and so forth. But if I was going to pick an area, I might say the Heisman, because you have three candidates from the Big Ten. You have Dante Moore, you have Smith from Ohio, and Justice Haynes from Michigan, and they should be three of the top 10 candidates, and two of them are in the top 10. But I mean, that says a lot right there. Like, those three should be in the top 10. One of them's not in the discussion at all. There's just a lot of good players in the Big Ten now, and I think there's still that bias towards SEC players. But I think overall, I'm not griping too much, because I think the Big Ten has rightfully earned its spot as the top dog in college football. So,
yeah. For me, I picked like the depth of the conference. That's kind of the SEC's new talking point, is they've kind of given up the, like, all right, maybe we don't have an Ohio State or even an Oregon this year, but our depth is much greater in the Big Ten. And, SEC Network and ESPN are constantly parodying that. But, you just look at a few examples, like Indiana's huge win against Illinois. Yes, that was a smackdown, but the instant talking points on SEC Network, and I think Paul Feinbaum had a tweet too. I don't want to get it wrong, so I'll hold off on actually.
He's always a reliable source.
Yeah. Basically, how Illinois is terrible now, and that it was like Indiana hadn't played anybody, but you move on to you move on to them, and using teams like Mississippi State is like a great win for all their teams that beat Mississippi State now, when they have the one pre-conference win against Arizona State, who is okay, but probably not the same team as they were last year. So I just think, and you can play that game with a lot. Illinois then beats a Duke team that I think is probably comparable to that Mississippi State team, but that's not a good one anymore for Illinois, but Mississippi State is for those other SEC teams. So it's just how, and I know it's mainly ESPN. I think the national narrative is getting better, to Jerry's point, overall, but I still think that's just like their newest thing, is just ripping on the depth of conference. And, it's tough to go in the SEC and win. Well, it's tough to go in and win in Iowa too. And Indiana did that. And after a big win against Illinois, I might add, and that's always tough for college kids to turn around and get that tough win on the road right after a big win at home. So that's what sticks out to me right now. Is just, yes, the top teams are getting their respect, and rightfully so. I just think the Big Ten is also a little deeper, with teams such as Washington, Illinois, even Nebraska is looking solid right now. And USC, I know they dropped out after they lost to Illinois, but I think there's a lot of good middle teams in the Big Ten also.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Kurt. I think that the depth piece gets talked about too much, and if you notice, they don't ever bring up the Illinois, the Nebraskas, the Michigans, or anything like that. I mean, Michigan's not a depth piece. They're up there in the top 4 or 5 for sure. But you're looking at some of these other teams that are not in the top 2 or 3 in the conference, and they don't really talk about those. It's the UCLA, the Northwestern, the ones they want to bring up, and it's like, yeah, you got an 18-team conference. Of course, there's going to be a couple at the bottom that kind of just take the L's. Unfortunately for Wisconsin fans, that's kind of become them this season as well. I know that put a smile on your face, Kurt, so I threw that in there for you. But
my favorite Badger season in a long time.
There you go. But I mean, I think you're exactly right, Jerry and Ryan. I think the Heisman does get a little overlooked. Right now, there are 4 Big Ten players that are in the top 7 of Heisman odds on FanDuel right now. Dante Moore is actually number 1 at plus 500, and I've seen some polls out there that don't even have him in the top 3. I mean, the On3 one that just came out, he was tied for number 1, so that's good. But there are some out there that just are kind of in love with the Carson Becks, the Trinidad Chambliss ones of the world. And don't get me wrong, those guys are doing a great job as well. But I just think Dante Moore, with what he showed against Penn State and what he's shown throughout the season, he needs to be far and away the favorite. And you saw that a little bit with Fernando Mendoza after that big Illinois win, and he wasn't even considered one of the favorites by some of the publications out there. So it is interesting. I think a lot of this, though, stems back to the rankings, right? You had 11 SEC teams in the top 25 preseason, and eventually you just keep beating each other, and it's like, well, you can't move them out because they lost to a ranked team, and they did this, and it takes a Florida beating a Texas in order to move them out, and it finally happened, thankfully. But I can guarantee you, if Florida wins this weekend, there's going to be a lot of people stumping for them to be ranked, even though they're 3-3 or like something like that. I don't even remember what their record is.
Just one more point with that too. It's like South Carolina's was everyone's darling pick to make the playoff this year as a not a conference champ, but just as an at-large bid. And we don't hear them just getting ripped for their performance so far this year. It's just like, oh, well, they're going against a tough schedule. Meanwhile, if other teams fall short, I mean, Nebraska, I feel like nationally doesn't even get talked about now as much as they normally would, with just the one loss to Michigan. So, and just.
Nobody views that as a potential playoff team, right? Michigan is What are they ranked right now, Jerry? 15th, I think.
15.
Yeah, they're ranked 15th, and people look at that loss and say, "Oh, you lost at home to Michigan," and it's like, yeah, that's a top 15 team in the country.
Right.
Honestly, probably should be like top 13 or top 12 in my opinion, but they don't get the respect for it. And honestly, they gave Michigan a really good game in that one. It was two really good teams that faced off. So, all right, let's get to the last question here. I think this is the one where people kind of have the most fun with it because you get to trash talk a certain team out there if the matchup is right. And Jerry, you may take advantage of this. We'll see. But who gets upset this weekend? In the Big Ten, there are a number of big games. Right now, Oregon sits as a 7.5-point favorite, I Bleav, on FanDuel last time I checked, over Indiana. Ohio State sits at a 14.5-point favorite over Illinois. UCLA was a spicy pick, talked about on our preview show as possibly the upset there. Michigan State is an 8.5-point favorite over them. So, Jerry, you've got a couple avenues here if you want to go against your rivals. But Jerry, we'll start with you, man. What is your upset pick in the Big Ten in week?
All right.
What is it, 7?
So I would love to say Illinois. I just don't see it happening. I don't think Indiana is going to upset Oregon, even though I do think that's going to be a terrific football game. I'm going to have to be a homer on this one, okay? I'm shocked that USC is actually favored against Michigan. I mean, I guess 3 points for being the home team. It's down to 2.5. But I think Michigan's going to go in and win that game outright. So technically that would be an upset. If I can't pick that game, I would have to say, oh man, I don't see Indiana. I don't see Indiana beating Oregon. So I can't go there. That's the only game I can come up with. Right, that's the only game I think
I was worried you're going to go with
underdog is
Purdue.
going to win. So I'm going to say Michigan, but man, do I hope Illinois win. I hope they win.
Yeah. For me, this one might be surprising. I'm going Wisconsin at home over Iowa. I know it's just a 3.5-point spread, and that they kind of Fickle's getting some heat there for not taking the timeouts, right, when the Michigan game still wasn't quite over, but he just kind of conceded. To me, I think that was like him saying, I know we played pretty okay against a team that we're outclassed against. Now we're going to get home and make our last stand. I think this is the biggest game Fickle's maybe had in his career right here at home. Night game. It is a big rivalry game. I know these teams aren't maybe at the spot that they're wanting to be, but Iowa's coming off a bye week, and they've looked pretty solid since the early season loss. And like I said, Fickle just is having the year he's having after, and the schedule is brutal. But the Badgers defense is still pretty good. That front seven is good to great against the run, and Iowa's without their starting quarterback. So I just think that Wisconsin does everything they can to make this a very ugly game and wins just like a weird 16-15 one at home at night against Iowa.
That would be very on brand for Iowa to have one of those losses on their schedule at some point. Jared, do you have the odds up for these games? I don't know all the odds.
I looked at them earlier.
How about Washington Rutgers? What is that at?
That's at 10.5, I Bleav, on FanDuel.
Okay, and then what about Nebraska Maryland?
That one was at 6.5 last time I looked on FanDuel.
Yeah, so maybe the Nebraska-Maryland game is a kind of an interesting one. I think that can go either way. I don't know about the other matchups. It's kind of a weird weekend. UCLA, though, like you're saying, that's pretty spicy. If they start putting it together, I was pretty impressed with the fact that UCLA was able to rally, because you think about it being in the locker room and, it's everything is thrown at you. You lose everything. You've got everything taken away. And then, but you're not terrible. You look at the stats, you're like, we're not that bad. If we can just start doing our thing, we've got some talent here. If we start putting it together, maybe we can kind of rebuild and redeem this season a little bit. Then you get that win, which is historic. This could really catapult this Bruins team. They could go on a little bit of a run. And I don't know if I'd want to be Michigan State this week facing them. So I kind of like the Bruins.
Yeah, that was one we talked about quite a bit last night. We were talking about, what does UCLA look like coming over? And obviously there's the great equalizer of Nico Iamaleava in his legs. I actually like Michigan State's linebackers more than I like Penn State's right now with how many are injured. I think before the season started they had better linebackers, but with some of the injuries now and some of the depth that Penn State is playing, I do have concerns about that. Guys, I'm surprised none of you went with my pick. This was the unanimous pick last week, was for Nebraska to be upset, and that was my pick in this one, was that Maryland would find a way at home to upset Nebraska, who's favored by 6.5. Maybe they don't get upset, but I feel like this is a good opportunity for Maryland to cover the spread if they can remain motivated, right? This Maryland team wins in September, they lose in October most of the time, much to the chagrin of their fans, but I'm very interested to see how this one plays out. So, guys, any final thoughts or anything on the games this weekend before we head out of here?
I think that Maryland-Nebraska game will be a good one. I actually do think Nebraska will win, but Maryland's been pretty impressive with that young quarterback that they have. They'll keep that one close, I think.
Oh, and it's a great matchup, too, because Nebraska has a really good pass defense right now, right? And with Malik Washington, that's the thing I like most about it, is that Maryland's at home. If Nebraska was at home, I think Nebraska wins no problem. But Nebraska having to go on the road for this one, I think that's really interesting.
I kind of like Washington. I think Washington's going to get better as the year goes on, and this could be an interesting game. Huskies, weird things happen on Friday night. So I think the Husky game's an interesting one.
I also think what Kurt said was a pretty good take on the Iowa-Wisconsin game.
Yes.
So I give you credit on that one, because especially I didn't know Iowa's quarterback was out. So that's a big plus. That's a great call on your end.
I don't think he's been officially ruled out, but he's been pretty banged up and he didn't finish the game. I think he's expected to be out. I don't think it's like an official thing, but yeah.
Hank Brown played in that last game, right? And he was not. Yeah. He was not pretty against Indiana.
Yeah. I was just going to go a couple other lines I like. I really like the under in that Wisconsin-Iowa game. I know I think it's 36.5 it opened at. I'm not sure if it moved from there. But
I'll have to check and see if it's still there.
I would go
Wisconsin's down to their, I think, third string now is who they're rolling with. Or I guess now he's their number 2, but
it's 35.5 now. It's
35.5. So I still like the under. I think it's a low, like I said, I think it's like a low in the teens type game. But and then just being a homer, I think, objectively the Gophers pass defense has been struggling so far this year. Purdue's been able to sling it. I like the over in the Gophers Purdue game, which I think is at 51. I think it was at 51 last time I checked. But anyway, if you're bettors out there, I like those two.
Can I ask a quick question here?
Sure.
Ryan, what's your take on Oregon, Indiana?
I like Oregon. I think it's going to be close. I think Oregon is going to be able to stop the run or slow down their run game, which is going to make them a little bit one-dimensional on their pass game, and at least that's what I'm hoping. If Oregon goes out and scores a couple of touchdowns, I think they've got it under control. If Indiana comes out and scores, and Oregon's got to fight their way and claw their way right back, I think it probably favors Indiana. But I think if Oregon plays classic Big Ten football, I think they win.
So can I ask one other question here?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go for it.
So say Oregon wins decisively, right? It's a very clear, clean victory for Oregon. let's say Ohio beats Illinois, but doesn't pound them. Is there any chance they flip-flop? Any chance at all?
No, I don't know. I think they want Miami to be up there. I think Oregon's going to sit there at the number 2, 3 spot. I think Ohio State's going to keep winning, and I think you're going to see them in the championship game. That's what I'm hoping for. That'd be a spicy championship game. That'd be a really good one to be able to sell to the advertisers that we need so dearly in our sport to keep this ball rolling.
Yeah, I do think you probably look at a better scenario of Miami moving up to 1 and maybe Oregon moves up to 2.
Oh,
I don't know
that's
if
a good
Oregon
point.
would go straight out to 1 because there is just so much love for Miami, but that would probably be what I would see if it was like a really close game against Illinois and Ohio State didn't look good.
I'll tell you what, Ohio State looks really good this year.
Yeah.
They
telling
really
me.
do. To me, they are the number 1 team in
Kurt
the country.
just saw it, yeah.
No,
Kurt,
that's what they do. That's what they do. I mean, it's just. But Jerry, what do you think, man? Can Michigan do it one more time?
I hope because I made a bet with the Ohio podcast, and I'll throw up if I have to wear Ohio State gear on my show. So I hope, but I'll tell you what, I do think Ohio State's the best team in the country, and it pains me to say that. But we'll see how it all plays out by the time November comes. We have to beat USC first, right? First things first, win the games in front of us.
Are they making you change the background too, or just putting on Ohio State gear?
Yeah, I have to put on a hat and shirt. But God, can you imagine if Eric has to do that?
Yeah. Well, as long as you don't have to buy it, I think it'll be okay. If that's when it really digs the knife in deep. If you got to go out and spend money on the program, right?
Oh, I'll be calling one of my buddies who likes them. I'll be like, "Give me the hat, give me a shirt."
How about the buck nut
The necklace?
Necklaces?
Yeah.
Guys, I wouldn't wear that. I mean, I could be in my coffin and you can't put one of those on me. Let alone paint my face like that. So God bless him, though. He has fun with it. So
yeah, that's fun. All right, guys. Well, hey, unless anybody has anything else, I think we'll end it here. We stayed pretty close to 30 minutes. I'm proud of us.
Good job, Jared. Appreciate you what you do, man. Great job.
Great talking to all of you guys.
Very good. And hey, seriously, folks, go out and follow these guys on Instagram, Twitter, all those places. We don't just bring people on because they're a part of the college huddle or anything like that. I only bring people on that I feel like do a good job on their podcast, do a good job covering their teams, talking football. And I think all 3 of these guys, from what I've seen on social media and what I've watched on their podcast, I watch all 3 of their podcasts and they all do a great job. So go check them out. Even if you're not a Wolverine, even if you're not a Gopher, even if you're not a Duck, still go over there and check them out. They do a fantastic job. So thank you so much for listening to everybody. We'll be back with another Around the Big Ten podcast next Thursday. Till then, have a good one. We'll see you next time.